Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. When you hear that sound, you know Brother Browder is back in town. It's Wednesday afternoon, 5 o'clock. We're here with another edition of the Browder File Show. I was just channeling my good brother Hadari Ali. That was his tagline when he came on Thursday morning behind Pharaoh Sanders. Got to have freedom. And we're still looking to get some freedom. And we're dealing with ongoing efforts to diminish and erase our freedom. You know, I've got so many people who are upset with what's been happening the last 140 days here in this country. And they ask themselves, how is this possible? How did we get here? Well, someone sent me a meme last week that I think speaks to this issue of how we got into this situation. And I like to share some of these stats with you. It speaks to the high degree, the unacceptably high degree of illiteracy here in the United States of America. The headline reads, "How can a population be convinced that a lie is the truth?" Well, it's easy. It's easy when you consider that 21% of all Americans are illiterate. That's 52 million adults. It goes on to say, and these are all stats from the National Illiteracy Institute. You can go to their website and read all of the startling statistics about where we are and where we are not as a country. It goes on to say that 54% of Americans can't read beyond the level of a 11-year-old. That's a fifth grader. And so we're talking about 141 million adults here in this country who cannot read beyond a fifth grade level. That's one of the reasons why most newspapers in this country and most television programs in this country are geared toward a 12-year-old literacy level. It speaks to what this country is, what it is not, and I want to talk about what it could be. It goes on to state that 57% of Americans have no education past high school, and that America ranks 36th in the world for literacy levels. And that, get this, I was totally unaware of this statistic before I saw this information. I saw this meme, and because of the organization from which this information comes, it's quite revealing. It says here that white U.S. born males are the highest group with low literacy, right? White US born males, white men. So if you combine all of these statistics, it's pretty easy to understand how we got where we are right now in June of 2025 and where we are headed next year and the year after. So one of the only ways that we can combat this foolishness, this profound ignorance, is to raise our level of literacy and cultural competency. And I've been saying for years that the media is the most powerful form of mental control, mental manipulation, the most powerful form of communication ever invented. I'm glad you all are listening to the radio and you're getting good content here on WPFW, but most people get their content from television and increasingly from social media. A lot of people get their awareness, their sense of awareness, historical and cultural awareness, as well as personal modes of operation from films. And so I want to briefly share with you some statistics regarding film literacy 101. Film literacy encompasses the ability to critically understand and analyze films, which includes their production techniques, narratives, cultural context. It involves understanding how films communicate, how they manipulate information, and how they reflect various aspects of society. Like traditional literacy involves understanding the written language. And so films are a way of transferring information quicker than reading does sometimes. And that information, because you're seeing it, because you're hearing it, and because you're feeling it on an emotional level, it settles in your consciousness and subconsciousness on a deeper level. And so, as I talk about this, as I talk about key aspects of film literacy, I want you to think about the power in Ryan Coogler's latest film, Sinners, which I think is the best movie of the year thus far. And the juke joint scene where Sammy has his debut is one of the most powerful scenes in any film that I've ever seen in my life. And I'm a real lover of good cinema. So I want you to internalize key aspects of film literacy. One is understanding the language of film. And this entails recognizing and analyzing visual techniques like camera angles and editing and cinematography and sound designs. Another is analyzing narrative structures, such as identifying the plot and character development and other themes and how they are conveyed through the film's visual and audio elements. Ryan Coogler is a master of this after 5 films. He proven himself after his second film, to be perfectly honest with you. Another key aspect of understanding and developing film literacy deals with critical thinking and interpretation, evaluating the film's message, its intent, and potential biases, and also understanding how different audiences might interpret what they see on the film. I've said on numerous occasions that the consciousness of the viewer when they sit down in the seat in the theater determines the consciousness or the lens through which they will view that film. And if your consciousness, if you only have a thimble-sized consciousness, then you'll only be able to retain or access a thimble amount of information. So by expanding your film literacy, you'll be able to appreciate the layers that are in most films, particularly the layered content in Ryan Coogler's classic Sinners. So cultural context and representation is everything in all 5 of Coogler's films. So understanding how his films reflect and shape cultural values, enhance cultural beliefs, and destroy certain cultural stereotypes, cinematic stereotypes. He does that. He does a wonderful job at doing that. And then lastly, another point I want to share with you has to do with appreciating film's power to influence. Understanding how film can and has been used for entertainment purposes, for educational purposes, for persuasion, for cultural enhancement, and artistic expression. All of these elements can be found wonderfully in Ryan Coogler's film, Sinners. And so today, I have a guest who's no stranger to WPFW, certainly is no stranger to Howard University. He got his PhD from Howard University in psychology department. He's been a guest on my show before, and I'm honored to welcome back to the Browder File, Dr. Jeff Menzise. What's up, Jeff? How are you?
Hey man, I'm pretty good. How you be, brother?
I'm good. I'm good. And can you turn your volume up a little bit? You sound a
Okay.
little low and a little muffled. We want
All
to
right,
make
let me
sure
see.
that everybody can hear you. And I specifically asked Jeff on today because he's a psychologist, former president of the DC chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists. And Jeff has a firm handle on understanding the historical events that shape our lives and how we respond to that, and how we can use history, how we can use psychology, how we can use numerous means to help us sharpen our skills and do better. So I invited Jeff on today so that we can talk, so we can do a psychological analysis of sinners. So Jeff, you ready?
Yeah, man. It sound any better?
Yeah, sounds much better. Sounds
Cool.
much, I was expecting you to say you always ready, man. You were
Man, I
born
stay ready.
ready.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So man, I've seen Sinner 4 times in the theater. And the streaming edition of Sinners just dropped on Monday evening or
Yeah.
Tuesday morning. I got that.
Yeah.
And I was watching elements of the film again. And this is a film, I have no problem saying it. Each time I see it, I appreciate it even more.
Mm.
This brother, Ryan Coogler, has done a masterful job of presenting specific aspects of our history and culture, and he gives us much to talk about. And I want you to help me and my listeners unpack some of the things that Ryan has presented to this community in our conversation today. So, just in terms of the framework of the film, Sinners is a love letter to Ryan Coogler's late uncle, James Edmondson, who died in 2015 while he was editing his second film, Creed. And one of the things that you feel in this film is this sense of family, the importance of family, and the impact of loss on individuals. So you can feel in this film um, Ryan Coogler's love for his uncle, his love for Mississippi, his love for the music, the blues music that his uncle exposed him to. But you also see, or I've also seen in the film, an examination of the character structure of specific characters in the film and how they have been impacted by loss. So I want you specifically, Jeff, to talk about this on a psychological level and then expand out as you see fit. The
Okay.
first point I want to bring up is has to do with the loss of the main characters in the film, and that's Smoke and Stack, masterfully played by Michael B. Jordan. And what we're told in the film is that their mother died while delivering the boys. Smoke came out first, but Stack was turned sideways, and it was while the nurse was trying to deliver Stack that the mother died. I assume due to complications of the delivery, and so the loss of their mother impacted their father, who shared his pain by constantly beating Stack, right? And that's one of the reasons why Spoke was always so protective of his younger brother, younger by a few minutes, younger brother Stack. And so the whole story is about Smoke protecting Stack, and then telling the story about when Sammy asked Stack, "Is it true that y'all killed your father?" He said, "No, man, my father beat me up, knocked me unconscious, and when I woke up, Smoke was burying him." So can you talk about what loss does to a child and how it impacts us psychologically and emotionally?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I go deep into that part of it, can I talk about a little bit more about that loss that you were just speaking on?
Of course, yes, please.
Okay. So it's really interesting, man. When you think about what identical twins are, right? They are literally the same person, right? So Smoke
Mm,
and Stack are the same person in the movie. Identical twins share the same DNA. They're literally one fertilized egg that, for whatever reason, clones itself.
mm,
So that would be the first loss that I recognize is the loss of that unification of the full self.
okay.
Because that egg splits, already fertilized now, becomes two of the same person. And it's really, really deep concept there of an identical twin. And when I say they're the same person, I'm literally saying that it's like the one consciousness had been split apart into two separate bodies, Tony. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why when you look at twin studies, you've got people who twins separated at birth. They would end up with a wife with the same name,
Yeah.
the same occupation, or at least in the same professional line. They
Mm-hmm.
name their dogs the same things. They go to colleges and major in the same major. It's literally the same person, and that single consciousness was forced to split into two physical bodies. And when we talk about cosmology now, and we talk about how, how the spirit or God descended into a human, or how the evolution of creation went from a unified to multiple divisions, that's
Mm,
considered the first loss, right? That loss of unification, and the rest of
mm.
our lives is designed to what? Reunify ourselves.
Exactly.
Osirian,
Religion, right? To
yes,
return to the source.
to
Hmm.
remember, as Osset did with Osir's body, right?
Yes.
And she went and had to find all the members of his body and remember them, put them back together. And so when you look at the movie from that perspective, when I saw that, I said, my God,
Hmm.
because it was so deep. And then when you talk about the loss of the mother, check this out. So the one twin killed the mother, the other twin killed the father.
Ah.
You see? And now
Hmm.
check this out. So the one that killed the mother is the yang, or the more fiery, or the male consciousness.
Mm.
if you look at how Stack moved through the movie, he even had on red at the beginning.
Yes, he
That
did.
was red. So he was red and Smoke had on blue.
Mm-hmm.
And Smoke killed the father, which is the masculine parent. And so it's almost like that duality went back and annihilated this its polar opposite or its complementary energy. It's
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. And so from there,
Good point, brother.
the rest of their journey through this movie represents that split consciousness operating at one still. If
Mm-hmm.
you remember the scene, and I get back, I talk about the death and loss as it impacts child development.
Oh, for
But when you
sure.
look at that scene, this to me was one of the most profound examples of this. When they lifted the cover off the truck and the snake was there. Spoiler alert, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
the
that's
snake was
look, man. Spoil whatever you want. If you haven't seen the movie by now, shame on you.
right. And it can't be spoiled. I mean, we could read the script and it wouldn't be spoiled. It's so good, right?
Yes,
But
indeed.
remember with the snake now, Stack had the knife.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at each other, he said, ready? Threw him the knife, Smoke hit it.
Yep.
They were one person, man. It was
Mm-hmm.
very deep and profound.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about what loss does in early childhood, whatever that loss is, I worked in foster care. I did the majority of my clinical training in foster care, providing therapeutic services and clinical assessments to children and adoptive care and foster care services. And a lot of them were diagnosed with like ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, any type of conduct disorder, various mood disorders. And they were just saying that these children inherently had these issues. And so I would give the basic standard assessments like the ADHD scales. One went home, one went to the school. I filled out one interacting with the kid. Boom. Yeah, of course, the numbers would show that. But then I would also use the subjective measures. So this whole movie again is about dichotomy. It's
Mm-hmm.
about two things, seemingly oppositional but actually complementary. And
Mm-hmm.
so you've got the objective measures, which are the paper and pencil people fill in the bubbles with their answers, and then you also got the subjective or the projective measures, where you just say, "Draw me a picture of your family," and that's all you tell them. To put down colored pencils, crayons, pens, pencils, what markers, whatever. They choose what they want, and they draw the picture how it comes from their unconscious. The idea is that they're projecting from their unconscious onto this screen or this piece of paper, right? And I was able to bring the two together in a more holistic understanding of what's going on with the kids. Tony, what I found out is that all of them, I don't care what the diagnosis was, were dealing with what we call an adjustment disorder, which is when a person experiences a certain level of trauma. In this case, all of it was related to loss,
Mm-hmm.
loss of trust or love from biological parent, or the literal separation from their biological parents. And so with that loss, they couldn't focus. So that's the ADHD part. Why couldn't they focus? Well, they can't focus. They just weren't focused on what you want them to focus on. They
Mm-hmm.
wondering where my baby sister at, because it was four of us and we all got split up into different homes. I wonder how my mom doing, how my dad doing, how my big brother that got killed, right? So their mind is occupied with other things. And the thing about trauma and loss with children is that it also depends on the disposition of that child, the personality of that individual. Because somebody who is like a fiery type of person, like Smoke and Stack were, right? They'll take it and they'll burn right through it. They would take that and be motivated by that energy, right? In fact, they came out blazing their double axes like Shango, taking
Mm-hmm.
heads off like Haruka Hootie. And they were just like, hey, we're gonna get this done, ain't nothing gonna stop us. Right. And so that personality type will handle it that way. Another personality type might internalize it, and that depression might hold them down, almost like wet mud, if you will, or water, which takes on the shape of whatever container it's in. So it just depends on what that personality type is going to determine the outcome and the impact, as well as environmental circumstances. But loss is one of the most difficult things for people to deal with, especially when it's unexpected loss. If you have somebody that passes away suddenly, as opposed to somebody who was sick and gradually transitions,
Mm-hmm.
somebody very young, like the Abeji twins, in the Yoruba tradition, the one twin that was lost, y'all lost one of her twins, and she mourned, but she also crafted a new one because she was determined and so nurturing and so full of love that she was going to bring another life into the world to bring her complementary child back. And so when you look at all of these perspectives of loss, it can go a whole lot of different ways. But according to the African worldview, as you and I both know, it's literally just a transition point.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that at the end of the movie when Smoke lost his woman and she was there nursing the baby. She was true Yema Yah form. She wore the blue beads and everything, right? She was a herbalist, a
Yes.
healer, a nurturer, right? Her body type
Mm-hmm.
was even watery, right? And
Mm.
so when she passed and he was on his way out, before he transitioned all the way, that veil was lifted and he could now
Yes.
clearly see the spiritual world. And she was sitting there, what, nursing the baby. And she
Hmm.
said, if you put that cigarette out, you could come and hold her.
I let you hold them.
Cause what? I don't want none of that smoke on her. He
Hmm.
said, you got to shed this life now, good brother. You're
Hmm.
no longer smoke. Let smoke go so we can come over here and be whole again. Deep,
Cool,
man.
man. Well, listen, you mentioned Annie, his wife.
Yeah.
So they lost their daughter
Mm.
earlier in the film, and Smoke left, and he was gone for 7 years. And the first thing he did when he came back was to take these flowers and lay them at the
That's right.
gravesite of his daughter. So there was loss
Yes.
between Smoke and Annie, and that loss divided them. So that's another layer of loss that we're introduced to in this film.
Yep.
So speak to that for a moment, if you can.
Yeah. And so it's like with the Ibeji twins and the Yoruba tradition.
Mm-hmm.
That idea is that they could either signify great wealth and great positive outcomes in life or tragedy throughout life, depending on how the twins are treated. And
Mm-hmm.
so what you see is that Smoke and Stack were treated relatively badly growing up, without a
Yes.
mother and an abusive alcoholic father. And so what would seem to me to be was like a generational curse of sorts, to where loss was a part of them, and
Mm-hmm.
either they were going to exact the loss or they were going to experience a loss. And it seems like when they were the ones exacting the loss, they were going to be good. So it's almost like a quote unquote necessary evil in their life to do what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I also noticed is that they were both very just. Like I listed two columns of the characteristic traits of each one being yang and one being yin, and just watching how they were complementary. But they were both very fair. They're both very just. They were both very family oriented.
Mm-hmm.
They went about it differently, but they were both very good people at the core. They were very
Like
good
when
people.
Stack, when Stack shot the brother in the kneecap who was trying to boost his truck. I can't have you going around saying you stole from Smokestack twins.
Come
You know,
on, man. Come on.
he had
Without without
values, he had principles.
without having a wound to show it. You know what I mean? And that was just. He was being fair. I ain't gonna shoot this one and not you.
Hey,
And he
look,
had no
man,
problem with it.
I have a technical question for you.
All right.
What is the distinction? Bear with me 1 second. What is the distinction between adjustment disorder
Mhm.
and
PTSD.
PTSD? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, PTSD is when a person experiences trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain type of trauma that they must have experienced and in a certain way for it to even count towards a diagnosis of PTSD. And that recently changed with the DSM-5 TR. I'm sorry, DSM-5.
Okay.
So at one point you could indirectly experience it and it could count as trauma points for you, just
Mm-hmm.
flat out generally. You could TV, music, whatever. And so then now what's happened is they said the only time that being exposed to traumatic media can impact you and give you points towards your diagnosis of PTSD is if it's a part of your job. And so, and I saw that, and to me, what Mr. Fuller said, what are they up to now, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I asked that question, I mean, what are they up to now? What they switching up for? And why in that way? Because before that, I would, I was analyzing music and looking at all the violence in the music. And my master's thesis or dissertation, one or the other, I counted how many times Ice Cube said the N-word in one song with him and Scarface. And it was in one verse. He said like 30 something times.
Mm.
You got gunshots, you got great illustrations of people being killed and maimed and all kind of stuff in music. TV nowadays on social media, the videos automatically start with people getting beat up or even getting shot.
Mm.
And so by removing that as a direct contributor to a diagnosis of PTSD, now what happens is a lot of things that are actually traumatic responses can fly under the radar because they're not going to be officially diagnosed with PTSD based on the new criteria. So now it could be anger.
Mm.
Now it could just be inattentive. It could just be intermittent explosive disorder. It could be anything like that now, but not trauma. Because if you recognize it as trauma, then you're addressing trauma in an appropriate way. If you think it's just intermittent explosive disorder, or if they're young enough, a conduct disorder, or if they're just anxious and heck scared of some type of phobia, agoraphobia, they don't want to go outside, it becomes that instead of what it truly is. And
Mm.
misdiagnosis leads to mistreatment almost every time, right?
Mm. Mm.
And so PTSD is after experiencing a traumatic event, you go through this sequence of traumatic response, right? Or response to that trauma. And it happens in certain ways, but it's a set period of time. You have certain triggers to it and all these other things. Now, briefly, adjustment disorder, which is the same, similar. But what this one says is that the person has experienced the trauma and they're taking longer than expected to adjust to it,
Mm.
right? So that loss, it's a certain period of grieving before a person comes back to semi-full functioning. That's typically expected, right?
Sure.
Again, all things considered. And so this is saying that, well, wait a minute, this is going on too long. So now they have this disorder with being able to adjust and cope with whatever the trauma or loss was. And now
Okay.
in this case, though, what I was talking about with the kids, their trauma is ongoing, right? And so to me, adjustment disorder was the closest thing, but it's kind of like what Dr. Joy DeGruy says when she says post-traumatic slave syndrome is a misnomer because the trauma is ongoing.
Sure.
So to me, it's similar to that, but it was closer than ADHD, right?
Mm-hmm.
It tells us it's trauma and they haven't adjusted to this separation yet. And to me, not adjusting to being separated from your biological family, even if your mom was putting out cigarettes on your bottom of your feet and you were being abused there, the separation is still traumatic. And as long as they're apart, then that trauma is ongoing and they won't adjust to that. Some things you're not supposed to get used to.
Sure, sure, sure. This is the Browder File Show. I'm Tony Browder, your host, and my guest today is Dr. Jeff Menzise. We're talking about the psychological impact of a psychological analysis of sinners. We've been discussing the impact of loss on characters in the film and also looking at loss within the lives of those within our very own community. As a result of my getting the streaming download, I've been able to look at certain scenes, and you're absolutely correct when you talked about the two brothers, Smoke and Stack, being of one mind. When we're first introduced to them, and they're in the when they're buying the property, and Stack is looking at the floor. He looks down at the floor. No, Smoke is looking
That was
down at the
smoke.
floor, and
Smoke was
Stack
kneeling down.
watches him, and then he says, right? He says what his brother is thinking, right?
Yes.
And so it just speaks to the point that you raised so wonderfully, man. And there's another issue of loss that I saw differently by looking at the film. I think it was the fourth time, and that's Grace Chow, the Chinese woman. And
Yeah.
when they're in the juke joint and the vampires have assembled outside waiting for them, Grace is ready to fight because
Yes.
Remick said that, we're going to go into town and get your daughter. So she's ready to fight to protect her daughter. And I thought about it, man. She's the one who extended the invitation for the vampires to come in to bring the fight on.
Yep.
And as a result of her fear of the loss of her daughter, her actions set in motion the means by which the entire town was saved.
That's right.
Right. So fear can motivate you to do some powerful things in hindsight. But I've heard too many people disparage her and disparage
Oh, yeah.
Chinese people because they took advantage of black folk. But there's so much to this film that people fail to understand. And one key point with regards to the Chinese character in the film is that Ryan Coogler put the words in their mouths. So that's Ryan
Mhm.
Coogler's
Mhm.
thoughts being expressed through them, which is
Mhm.
important for us to understand. So look, another point that I know that you are particularly gifted in answering has to do with the fear that many Black Christians have of
Mhm.
traditional African religious and spiritual practices, right?
Yeah.
I've heard of folk in the film uh, stand up in the middle of the film and tell folk they're going to hell for
Wow.
watching these demons. And I asked the question, why would someone feel compelled to disrupt someone's movie-going experience because they were maybe unsure about their relationship with their God, that they felt a need to try to save everybody else? Can you kind of speak to what a fear or ignorance of African spiritual religious practices does to people who have embraced spiritual traditions of their former oppressors?
Yes, sir. And what I want you we want to go back to the Chinese conversation after I answer this, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, of course.
Okay,
Of
cool,
course.
cool, cool. So that when somebody like that would stand up in a theater and proclaim all that, basically holy rolling, they're compensating for something. To me, it seems like they're trying to they themselves are feeling judged.
Hmm.
Not because they're in there, but because they see themselves on that screen.
Mm.
If you look at the movie itself, again, that dichotomy piece, you
Yes.
had the movie opened up with Sammy going into the church, right?
Mm.
Clutching that guitar
Yep.
above the door that he walked in. was a crucifix.
Mhm.
Behind his father on both sides were two crucifixes. The
And
churches,
one above his father's head.
it
So
was
there were
three
three.
black, that's right, it was three back there. And it was triangle window at the top and
Mhm.
a triangle steeple at the top of the building. That whole, again, that split and that transformation, that trinity, the one and the three type of thing, right? And
Mhm.
so you got all this symbolism playing out. And Sammy was clutching the one tool that actually saved his life.
Mhm.
And his father was trying to convince him to do what? Put it down and
Discard
replace
it.
it with this crucifix. Sammy wouldn't let go
Mhm.
because Sammy knew what it did for him. And that was the power of it. And so I think that what's happened over the centuries is that we have been force fed out everything that's against our way. It's almost like if Superman was tricked into believing that kryptonite was a multivitamin, it was good for him. That to me, that's what these westernized religions have been fed to us as. And not only that, but
It's a
it's like
great
one of
metaphor,
those,
brother.
man, and it's like one of those medicines that's used to break addiction that can make
Mhm.
cigarettes taste really bad or make alcohol taste really bad. I
Yeah,
think they've conjured something up because Europeans they use witchcraft and magic too. And
absolutely.
that's part of why they force fed us out of our way. So now we're bringing water guns to a nuclear battle. Because they don't, our ancestors, one of our elders, I'm sure you know who it was, said we got our ancestors standing in the unemployment line, basically. You
Yeah.
know,
Dr. Newton used
Dr.
that
Newton.
reference many times.
Why these folks is using theirs full-fledged on the money, the name of cities, the name of districts of Columbia, even Columbia herself. What I mean? They're using all their magic, all their sorcery, all their mythological gods, and they're using this power against us. And the best way to maintain control is to force us to turn our backs on it. The
Sure.
best way to make us turn our backs on it is to get us to adapt and adopt something that's very much weaker than what we actually have. But in our genius over the centuries, we've never fully let it go. What was demonstrated in the movie, all those people that was in that church, just like they ended up in the juke joint, they
Mhm.
also practiced the African spiritual essence, right? We cloaked things under the oppressor's way. And unfortunately, cloaking it allowed it to not only be masked and covered, but eventually transition out and into it. But we all understand our way on an unconscious level, at least. But when somebody stands up in a movie theater like that, or when people say you're going to hell for watching this movie, I think that what happens is they became afraid, if it's fear, they became afraid of that spirit that stirred within them and that familiarity of the experience because ain't nobody got great grandmamas who didn't know this stuff. None of us do. No, well, the younger people now because their great grandmothers were younger, but
Mhm.
those of us born, I would dare say the 80s, 70s back, we've had somebody that we've known that worked these things on their own, whether they go in and get in the numbers books and
Mhm.
plan the dream books to play the numbers, or
Mhm.
they have a dream about fish and they know that somebody's pregnant, or whatever the case may be. And you can look in a European sense and you see Carl Jung talking about dream interpretation and archetypes and things of that nature on a psychological level. And then you look at them talking about these vampires or haints, is what Andy called, she talked about, oh, these ain't haints, these is vampires.
Mhm.
We know this stuff is real, but we've been scared literally to death by the European and oppressive powers to keep us not only ignorant, but weakened and too afraid to fully and openly and without apology embrace our way.
All right. All right. Well, look, Jeff,
Yo,
let's put a pin in this before I have you talk about the Chinese characters in the film.
yeah,
I've got a guest who has come on just for a few minutes to talk about something that's connected to what we're talking about right now, and that's ancestor acknowledgement. I've got Sister Yuri Huggins from Adasi on. Yuri,
right.
I'd like for you to please unmute yourself and share with our listeners something about Adasi and the upcoming event that Adasi has planned here in Washington, D.C. Welcome, sis.
Well, thank you so much, Baba Tony Browder and Dr. Jeff Menzise. It's so great to see you. I'm such a great admirer. Always talk about you. And of course, Tony is an essential part of our lives. That's all I can say. It's so much we can say about him, but he really is. So ADASI is the acronym for the African Diaspora Ancestral Commemoration Institute. Many people know us as ADASI, and we are 33 years old. But Adasi was founded in order to institutionalize the remembrance of our African ancestors who perished in Middle Passage and those who survived, the millions of men, women, children, and babies who were kidnapped, trafficked, and shipped, who were victimized, terrorized, and traumatized. But yet many resisted enslavement. And so we do so in a way to remember them, to honor them, to commemorate them in so many different ways, but also those who survived the Ma'afa, whose shoulders we stand on, all of us stand on those shoulders of those great ancestors. And it gives us a chance to really deal with the shame and the pain, the fear and the guilt that we still carry in our DNA. I know often Dr. Clark would say that it seems as though we have collective amnesia, right? We have forgotten about those millions. So what Adasi is, we kind of see ourselves as a reconnecting instrument, connecting the past to the present, to the future, by remembering. I would say when we disconnect ourselves from the ancestors, we disconnect ourselves from the source of our power. But when we remember the ancestors, we begin to draw upon their strength, their courage, their wisdom, their determination. That AI that Tony Browder is often referring to, that ancestral intelligence, it allows us to reconnect with that source. And so this year is our 33rd annual Ma'afa commemoration, and it's entitled Our Story, Our Journey, Ancestor Memory Heals. And it really deals with that reconnecting to that ancestral knowledge that we have, our community, as well as strengthening ourselves, coming together, reaffirming our connectedness to each other, to our community, and to the global African community as well. And so if you want me to, Tony, I can just quickly go through. We have a host of individuals who are going to be presenting. Tony's our keynote speaker, of course, a central part of it. And then we have many of our soul sister, Ayana Gregory, the Queen of Consciousness, raising poems, Laini Mataka, Ivy Hilton, the queen of the meditation and the healing and the power. And so that is going to begin at Union Temple Baptist Church at 10 a.m. on Saturday, June 14th. And then at around 11:30, we begin to process down to the Anacostia River for a spiritual healing ceremony, which will be led by Chief Fakunle Oyasanya, Mama Tendai, and one of our Dasi sisters, Okonfo Akua, and they're going to lead that spiritual healing ceremony. But of course, we begin with the point of libations. What is significant about where we go to do that spiritual healing ceremony under the 11th Street Bridge, before we knew the history, and this is how the ancestors work. When we went down, the national parks was telling us, go over there and do the program. We said, no, we want to do it here. They said, go over there. We said, no, we want to do it here. We started it here. Then we found out 2 years later from our historical advisor, C.R. Gibbs, that bridge represented a pathway. The precursor was the old Navy Yard Bridge, and it represented a pathway from slavery in Maryland to freedom in the District of Columbia when DC had emancipation in 1862. So that's how the ancestors work. You know, they feel you, they guide you. Just have to learn, be quiet, and listen, remember.
And to trust them.
And to trust them, Tony.
Absolutely.
And so that's a summary of this year's commemoration.
All right. Well, thank you so much. You will be on several other programs on,
Yes, we
on
will.
PFW over the course of the next 10 days, sharing more information about this event. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate you, my sister.
Thank you so much, Tony. And thank you for being our host, our keynote speaker. And again, you are essential to who we are. Peace and blessings. Thank you, Dr. Menzise. You take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so Jeff, I know you don't get that in Cincinnati, so you may want to come back to DC next weekend, brother.
Hey, you know, I actually was on my way, man. I was like, I'm gonna spend the summer in Cincinnati. I'm not gonna do it up there in the DMV, man. You know, it's a very powerful place. I remember years ago, it was I think it was this sisters organization, but it was also that spiritual coalition with with the Ifa and the Khan of Saraset. Everybody comes together. We went down to Virginia and they discovered that that lot was built upon grave sites.
Yes, yes.
We did a ceremony on that parking lot, man, and that was so powerful, you know. And just to see all of the different African spiritual traditions coming together and taking their part in the actual ceremony. So, like I remember it was Saraset Society. That was before I got initiated in the Ifa. And so, as a member of Saraset, you know, our role was to purify the ritual space, you know. And so we have literally a purification song and dance, which is what you saw in centers. You know,
right.
That
The juke joint thing. Yes, absolutely.
The juke joint itself was a ritual floor. And so it was purifying. That's, you know, if you go back to when Smoke and Stack were first buying the place, and Smoke was staring at the floor, studying it, and Stack say, this floor was clean. You know, his dude said, yeah, you know, he spit on it. You know, like, yeah, it was. And he's like, well, what was on it? You know, he asked what was on it, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
were being conscious and intentional about the floor space. So they either they consciously understood it as be ritual, they're about to set it off, or it was just a part of that spirit moving them.
Brother, let me share an element with you about that particular scene. I did a little research on that building, and
Mm.
actually, it was a sister Ife Williams was in town and shared with me that a friend had done some research on that building. That building was a model of the cotton processing facility in Mississippi, where the fan from the cotton engine was attained to kill Emmett Till. And so
Wow.
the reference to that being a killing field, a killing floor rather, was
Yeah.
a oblique reference to the murder of Emmett Till in a
Wow.
facility just like that, right?
So many layers, man. I
It's
mean,
so many layers. But
and
you
that,
wanted to talk about Grace Chow and the Chinese
yeah, man.
relationship in the film.
Yeah, and tied it into ceremony and ritual space, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they were conducting a ritual, right? I mean, you've been to African ceremonies. You know, it always has song, chant, and dance. Always has a designated space. Always has somebody leading it. The chanters are singing the songs and chanting. And it's not just songs. Like when you watch the movie Amistad, and
Mm-hmm.
they had made it seem like they were just up on the deck dancing and exercising and singing. They were chanting to a warrior spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
they were being mounted and being possessed,
There you
so
go.
that they would have enough courage, adrenaline, strength, fire, determination, and risk of life to
Mm-hmm.
give us free, to literally dig nails out the floor with their own fingernails,
Yeah.
right? That's what they were doing. Europeans thought they was just dancing and boogalooing, right? And so when you see that scene and that ceremony taking place, it conjured up all the spirits, because even the Asian ancestors showed up. And
Exactly.
so, and that's what let me know that these weren't culturally appropriating people. They were a part of this village. They
Mm-hmm.
were as much a part of this village as every black person in that room. They were
Mm-hmm.
in that town. They had the shop. Smoke could come straight to them. He didn't have to say nothing twice. He said, "Hey, I want this." Negotiated at the dealing with the little sister, how to negotiate. He came and negotiated. They had the village family exchange.
Mm-hmm.
No question about it. Yep, we'll do it. And so they were
Mm-hmm.
a part of the family. Again, their ancestors were communing with our ancestors in that same space.
Yes.
And so with that, their cultural spirituality was awakened as well and put on Front Streeters. And if you even see the sister, Asian sister, she was dancing, going
Yes.
through and she went and got her husband, like, man, get on up, boy. We got to get it. You know, they were in that. And so all of that increased their spirituality, that
Yes.
whole ritual of dancing. And you know, every time I watch it, my eyes start sweating for some reason during that scene.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
can't do nothing about it, you
Yeah.
know. In the theater, I played it off, you know. I was like, all right, I had to, yawn and kind of wipe my face because, I didn't want people to see me just eyes sweating and stuff, thug tears. But I couldn't help it. Every time I watch it, it happens. It's the same sense of being overcome and overwhelmed with
Mhm.
something. It's such a power, like you said, the most powerful scene I've ever seen in a movie. And
Exactly.
so when you get to that part where she is ready to die, that's what it was. She was
Mm-hmm.
ready to put her life down for her
Mm-hmm.
daughter's life. And I understand the critique on the other end saying, no, she's the reason why everybody got took out. Right. I understand why that would be the perspective, because in some ways it's true.
Mm-hmm.
But
But
her
it's a limited perspective. It's only one part of the whole, a very
but,
small part of the whole.
but even the other perspective that she did it to save everybody is still just a slice of it too.
Mm-hmm.
We have to see it all together. And both things can be true at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
because there could have been another way to deal with it. So, for example, if but again, she had a warrior spirit.
Mm-hmm.
She was ready. She was gung ho. She's like, "We're gonna do this. Come on in. Bring it. Bring the fight in."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And if you notice in the scene, and it took me seeing it the third time before I really saw who she killed, but you know who she killed. She
Which
killed
one?
her husband.
Her own husband.
She killed her husband, and both of them burned up together.
That's the two that were on fire. Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Yep.
that was her husband.
Wow.
Right. And see,
Very deep. But
here's
see, Tony, that's what shows that she was ready to sacrifice it all. She said, "I tell you
exactly.
what, I need to kill him because he can't exist like this, and they
Hmm.
definitely ain't going to get my baby to make her exist like this. So
Well,
whatever y'all talking about, hesitant, kind of scary, possibly conditioning from your slave experience,
hmm
I ain't got that in me. I'm going to war with these fools, and because I'm in here, we got to go." That's how I
exactly.
saw it.
Another interesting aspect about the introduction of the Chinese character in the film is that Ryan did his DNA, and
Mm,
he had his wife's uh, family do their DNA, his in-laws, right? So his wife Zinzi, her mother is Filipino, and her
mm,
father is an African American brother from Chicago. So
mm.
when the father-in-law did his DNA, it came back with a hit for um, his Y chromosome came back with a hit for Han Chinese.
Wow.
So his African American grandfather, his African American father-in-law's grandfather was Chinese and married a sister in Mississippi.
Huh.
So
Wow.
there was this blending of cultures. There's
Yeah,
always been this blending of cultures that leads to the essence of who we are, right?
that's right.
So look, let's look at this issue of how people respond to horror films. You
Mm,
know, I saw the film Friday before last in the AFI Theater in Silver Spring. And it was
mhm,
the first time I saw it because normally, if I go to see a film, I go to see the film and I don't want to be distracted by folk talking in the film or texting or what have you. So I usually
mhm,
go early in the morning. I saw the film Friday evening and the theater was full. So I had an opportunity to hear how the audience was reacting to certain things.
mm.
And I could hear people shouting when they saw the rattlesnake and killed the rattlesnake. There were several other scenes which exacted gasps from the audience. So I see people responding to frightening scenes in the movie. Now, it doesn't bother me. I know it's just a movie. I can logically process this, but how do people deal with internalizing the fear that they see on the screen and allow it to well, internalize that fear such that it also frightens them. Tell me about that feeling, that
Yeah.
emotion.
Yeah, man. It's really a natural human occurrence.
Hmm.
And what you have done, you've evolved beyond it though, right? Because you're able to, because one, you're in there critically analyzing, you're in there studying, right? And so you're able to remove yourself as a direct participant and turn into an observer, right? And so you have the intellectual prowess to separate the emotion, even though it's something might startle you, you might jump, you want to internalize and ruminate over it, but
Hmm.
there might be some things that can make you ruminate.
Sure.
But at the same time, again, you know, typically scholars are able to separate and study and not immerse themselves in what they're studying unless they intend to. And then once they immerse themselves, they can also back themselves out, right? And like just for example, when I said my eyes sweat when I see that scene, you know, that's something that's else being triggered in me. It's something in
Hmm.
like you were talking about earlier, the cinematography, the camera angles, the
Hmm.
song, the dance, the moving through the eras, all of that part of it is something that takes you and it taps into the emotional parts of you and it pulls it out. I don't care what you do. Creed was like that for me too.
Hmm.
And it was just because my cousin and I, when we were little, we used to watch all the Rocky movies, my best friend cousin, and he passed away. And so I was sitting in Creed, like, man, just thinking
Hmm.
about, man, Jamie would, man, I could imagine me and Jamie watching this together, Apollo Creed's son. And I mean, and I cried in Creed, but it
Sure.
was because it triggered me thinking about my cousin who we watched all the Rocky together growing up as babies. So anyway, that's a part of it. And the other part is that most people are emotional creatures, right? Most people have not studied and intentionally done the work to evolve themselves beyond being led by their emotional state. That's
Hmm.
why people crash out. You got the smartest people in the world, some of the richest people, most intellectual, I'm sorry, people in the world, some of the richest, wealthiest people in the world, and their emotional conditioning will take them out, right?
Yeah.
Have them acting stupid, right? Like I saw a post from a saw a post from a Offset the other day, Cardi B's ex-husband,
Hmm.
and there's something where forgive the baseness of this, but it's relevant. She supposedly had did his son's hair just like the new guy that she's kicking it with, braided up in the exact same way. And so he said, "Call me Mr. Crash Out." He said, "This is how people end up dead." And he puts this on social media. I'm like,
Oh,
dude, but that's emotion.
sure.
Emotions make poor leaders, but great servants. And unfortunately, people aren't well enough. They haven't disciplined themselves enough to master the emotions in order to put them to work for them.
Hmm.
Instead, they're led by them. Jesus in the temple, people like to act like he was mad when he went in the temple and there was like thieves and money changers and stuff was in there. People say, oh, he was mad. And so he went there flipping the tables, letting loose the doves. No, he wasn't. Jesus was a high initiate. Jesus wasn't led by emotions ever. He mastered them and he used them. So he went in there. If he'd have gone in that temple, Tony, and said, peace, please stop turning my father's temple into a den of thieves, they would have smacked him. You know what I mean? He would just got smacked down. He had to go in there and talk the language that they understood, which
Mm-hmm.
was product damage, profit loss, and the fear of getting your butt kicked. Right. So he channeled the energy of anger so to induce the fear so that they would respect and get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't understand that you can even train and master your emotions. They feel like they're out of control. That's why people say stuff like, well, I'm a Cancer, I'm a Gemini. That's just how we are. They
Yeah.
think that they're fixed, and that's the Western perspective of personality and emotion. The non-Western or the Kemetic version, the Egyptian version, the African version is no, 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 these are tools. You know, the E in emotion, even though they don't say the word emotion, E is the energy. Motion is the movement. So emotions are just energy that moves. And I learned this from Rhonda from men when I was being initiated with Osiris Set. And it's just
Okay.
like it's like a light shining through a stained glass window. It's the same light on this side, but it comes out all these other colors on this other side. And so it's based upon how you interpret the source of the experience that's going to determine what label you put on the energy that's a result of that.
Mm.
So let's say, for example, a little baby with them little hard white shoes came through, grandson, and stepped on your foot. You ain't gonna push him down. You're gonna pick him up. What are you doing, boy? You know, you're gonna love him up. And
Mm-hmm.
but let some grown dude come through, boot on. Let's Senghor come through with something. You know, good brother. So we can't even use Senghor, but somebody else come, some grown man come and step on your foot. It's the same step on your foot. It could be the same amount of pressure, but it's gonna be interpreted different because it came from something different. And your
Somebody who should
emotional
know better.
response is gonna be something totally different based on that. You again evolved. You might say, "Hey, excuse me, brother," and you might not kirk out, but somebody else will kirk out and lose both their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's it. We're just not trained, Tony. We're not initiated. We don't have the actual rites of passage training that takes us from being base level humans and to approaching our divine selves that actually does exist. And so the ones that are more base, animalistic, if you will, that's what they're going to do. Those of
Okay.
us that are more evolved, we're going to respond rather than react.
Got it. Got it. Folks, you are listening to Dr. Jeff Menzise, psychologist, a lover of African culture, African people, African spiritual traditions. And we're talking about psychological impact of sinners, certain scenes in sinners, certain characters within the film, and how they are a reflection of us in some regards. So it's 5:53, and I'm going to have to. My time here is going to end in about 5 minutes. I've got another question that I want to ask you, and if you don't mind, if you can give me an extra 10 minutes, you can finish your question, answering the question in our overflow room. But the soundtrack to Sinners is as powerful as the movie itself, right? And the title song, Sinners, has a line that speaks of so many things. The brother sings, I'm not scared of werewolves or vampires, but man, I always lose sleep when I dream that I can set my people free. So he's not scared of vampires, things that, the movies tell us we should be afraid of. I'm not scared of vampires and werewolves and shapeshifters. I'm not scared of none of that. But I always lose sleep. I always have nightmares when I dream that I have to set my people free. That's
Mm,
what frightens me. And that's a powerful line. And I really want you to unpack that fear of working, struggling, fighting to free our people. And the
yeah,
pushback that we've got to deal with, man. It's profound. So before we end the show, just tell folk who you are, tell folk how they can reach out to you, how they can purchase your books, and what you're doing. Let us know if you're going to be in DC anytime soon, so people can check you out.
yeah. All right, thanks for that, Tony. So yeah, my website is mindonthematter.com. All of my books and stuff, you can find them there. So website mindonthematter.com. Email address is drjeff like Dr. Jeff at mindonthematter.com. You can reach me there. Office number 202-813-9079. So any of those means, it's fine to get in touch with me. Do a lot of coaching and things of that nature. A lot of people like to call me and get kind of insight things about child raising, potential diagnoses, school-based issues, relationship stuff, all kind of stuff, man. And I'm truly a servant of the community, brother. So you know, I try to look out as much as I can for our folks.
So let me ask you this question with regard. I was talking to a good friend of mine whose daughter just graduated from college, and she's now going to Iowa State to get a master's in psychology.
Okay.
Iowa State to get a master's in psychology, right? So
Yeah.
why should a black person who is majoring in psychology become a member of the Association of Black Psychologists? Is that
Oh,
important?
yeah, oh man, absolutely. So I was emailing with been going back and forth with Dr. Akbar the past few days, man.
Okay.
You know, convention is coming up. He's like, so might we see you at the convention this year? You know, I just started a class up in Morgan, concepts of psychology in ancient Egypt. And so I'm using
Mm,
his book, Light from Ancient Africa, and I'm going to
okay.
gift it to all of my students as the foundational read to build the context for the rest of the semester. And you know, he's one of the founders of ABSI.
Yes,
And
indeed.
what ABC does is it dispels the myth that one, Black people don't have a psychology or we don't have psychologists. It
Hmm.
also dispels the myth that psychology began with Europeans. And then the third thing it does is it gives you the literature, I mean, the vast amount of writing, research, and perspectives that the people have done over the past 50, 60, 70 years to rebuild our library of our understanding of Black psychology, African psychology. And so, if for another reason, it gives you that expanded perspective. Every class in psychology I teach, I only teach at HBCUs, by the way, but I
Hmm.
always have to supplement the syllabus and the curriculum with the African stuff. And I do it on the front end. And I show them that the African perspective of psychology is like, so I said, what we do when we teach you only the Western perspective is we limit you to just what's on this board right here. So let's say that you thought reality was only on this board, nothing else existed. I said, then I teach you this African worldview perspective. I said, now you're able to look all the way around the room, out the window, down the hall, and you see the rest of creation. That's how much you're forsaking when you only know about the Western perspective of psychology. A besides that helps you to lift your eyes off of that limited perspective and worldview from trusted, concerned, caring elders who are willing to walk you through step by step. Many of them who have the earliest articles on it are still there. And so coming into that type of
Sure.
community, it does wonders for your own mental health and well-being. It teaches you coping strategies and tools for when you're facing that Iowa curriculum and the Iowa environment.
Okay. I'll make sure that my friend passes this aspect of our show to his granddaughter so that she understands the importance of Black psychology. My guest today is Dr. Jeff Menzise, beautiful brother, beautiful friend, profound
Excellent.
African thinker, Black psychologist. Hold on, Jeff. Don't go anywhere. We're going to wrap up this show. I'm going to thank my listeners for tuning in to the Browder File. I want you to, I got a message from Joni, and you should go to Plymouth Congregational Church. This Sunday, they're going to honor Bernice Reagan and Sweet Honey in the Rock on the 22nd of this month. We're going to be in Meridian Hill Park, Malcolm X Park, to celebrate the winter solstice. We're going to have a big WPFW festival. You'll be hearing more about that, and we want to see your face in the place. So as always, I'm always appreciative of the time that you allow me in your life. The 1 hour on Wednesdays between 5 and 6. This is Tony Browder saying I appreciate you and I love you to life. Khalil, take us out with my man Maurice White. Peace. See you next week.
You gotta love you.
All right, that's it. Quick and easy. Appreciate you, brother. So
Man, appreciate you too.
let me go back and repeat the lyrics to the title song for the film Sinners. The brother says, I'm not scared of werewolves or vampires, but man, I always lose sleep when I dream that I can set my people free, set my people free. And at the very end of the song, after he repeats that phrase several times, he says, we will never be free. That's his nightmare. So unpack that nightmare. How true is it for some folk?
Mhm.
And how do we wake up and manifest freeing our people as a reality?
Mhm. A very, very powerful lyric, very powerful concept, but very, very real too. And so what I'm getting from it is that this he don't fear vampires or werewolves, but he fears thinking that when he thinks about liberating our people, right? Paraphrasing, of course. And
Mhm.
so werewolves and vampires ain't never did nothing to him. But what would he have to be freeing his people from? White supremacists. And he knows how brutal that is. He knows the amount of bloodshed, loss, and revolution that's going to have to take place in order for us to absolutely be free. It's paralyzing. I mean, even the fact that the vampire showed up as a white dude playing their music to mesmerize, and almost had them mesmerized, you know, because again, they worked their witchcraft too. You remember Stackley, he was swaying with it for a minute.
Exactly. They're pretty good, he says.
Yeah, right. And Smoke was the whole time serious contemplation, watching him like, no, stop that. Because he felt something was happening. They were enchanting them with their magic. And even when you notice after they had taken and killed all the black folks and converted them, right? The white people's song changed. It got a
It
lot
had
more
soul.
lively.
It had soul. Absolutely.
They were using
Absolutely.
them. That field was their ritual floor. And they were walking in line. Remember how they was walking through the background, kind of instead it was all turned it almost into a musical, almost comical. They're in the background dancing and stuff. And so their song changed when they were able to what? Infiltrate the African bloodline. When they were able to infiltrate the African spirituality and co-opt it and bring it in. What the brother in that song is saying is that we don't know and realize the wickedness of that which we are up against. No, I'm sorry. He's saying we do realize it, consciously or not. And that level of fear is enough to make us say, I can't do it. And therefore we will not be free because of what it's going to take. What I'm sorry, I keep forgetting Grace. Was it Gracie, the Asian woman?
Yes, Grace Child.
Grace Chow. So she, again, didn't have that psychological program in the same way that the African people did.
True.
She didn't have that same conditioning that African people did. She didn't have the plantation. She didn't have the Middle Passage. She didn't have the hangings and lynchings. She might have seen it vicariously, but it wasn't her people in mass like that, right? And so she was ready to go. She didn't have that fear. All the black folks was in there pretty much frozen though. The same way. They were thinking they were ready to go, but they were staying inside and they were going to what? Wait it out until the sun came up.
Sunrise. Yeah.
Wait it out till the sun come up. We ain't going out there because that's a wicked beast out there. We know what they're capable of. Why do we know? We're here. How we got here. How we have to exist here. The Ku Klux Klan sold, the Grand Wizard sold the daggone place to them, right? They were right there. And so, and that was one of the talking points of the main vampire. He said, look, you know, they were racist. We might go back and get them too. He was like, it's all about love and coming together, you know, with his deceitful ways. We knew the story already. We've heard that before. We've experienced it before, and we know it well enough. Cutting babies out of stomachs, dragging little boys behind pickup trucks, you know, burning bodies alive, you know, forced breeding, raping, pillaging. We know the wickedness of that beast, and knowing that, when we think about, dream about freeing our people, we also know that that's what we got to go up against in full out declared war. And to full out declare war on that, you see what it did when we weren't declaring war. What will it do once it's open and on? And so that's why I look at a lot of stuff that's going on right now when white supremacists try to tempt, you know, or try to provoke black people to react or respond, or like in Cincinnati and Lincoln Heights, where, you know, the Nazis, neo-Nazis came up on the bridge.
Yeah.
They were, you know, Lincoln Heights is one of the oldest black communities in Cincinnati. In fact, at one point, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of the wealthiest spots. And what happened is Nikki Giovanni's from. And so when they went that space, just like they went to Mother Emanuel Church, that wasn't a happenstance when they went there. And even the night that he went there is very historically significant for Black liberation. And so when they came up there, they were trying to provoke. And a lot of times we don't take it seriously enough. And because we don't understand the depth of the wickedness. But when it's all out war being declared and we're no longer just reacting and chanting and marching and protesting and not going to this store and that store. But when we finally say, game on, take up arms, we're gonna do this or we're gonna die trying, they turn into something else that we haven't seen before. And we've seen it indirectly when they have war against each other. My colleague Stacey Patton up here at Morgan, she's working on a book right now, and it's called Strung Up. It's about lynching children. And what she does is she goes all the way back to Europe when it was European and the things they would do to each other and to their own children. And you get a glimpse of this wickedness. I mean, and she's doing the job that she's doing on uncovering this stuff. And what she's showing is how vile they can be unprovoked. And then when they have their wars against each other and they're provoked, it shows, you know, Middle Ages type stuff.
Yeah,
You think
absolutely.
about all of the different tools that was created for torture.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a
Mhm.
sick mind, unprovoked. And so when it is provoked, that's a whole nother beast. And that's what the brother is saying in that song. He's scared of that. Ain't no
Hmm.
werewolf or no vampire ever did nothing to me. That one right there, though, nah, fam, I
Hmm.
can't do it.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, that was more than I expected, brother. And
Yeah, I
it's
be trying to
typical.
hold my tongue sometimes, man, but
You know, we're approaching a time where we can't afford to hold our tongues, but we also have to be strategic about what we say and to whom we say it. But it's time to wake up those who are prepared to be awakened. Not everybody's going to wake up. Not everybody's going to pick up arms or even arm themselves mentally. But it's time to take a more aggressive stance and protect those people and those institutions and those values that we love. Because if we don't, it's over. Game over.
yeah,
No
and you see
question
what
about
Smoke
that.
used to survive as long as he did.
Hmm.
It's the juju that Annie gave him.
Yeah. You know what? You mentioned the juju. I was looking at I was going through and examining that last fight scene between Remick and Sammy,
Yeah,
where Remick throws Sammy in the water,
yeah,
and he literally baptizes him 3 times. And Sammy begins reciting the Lord's Prayer, and Remick joins him in
yep,
reciting the Lord's Prayer.
yep,
And then all of the black zombies, start reciting it as well. And he says, he makes reference to the fact, and I copied the text down. He says, long ago, the man who stole my father's land forced those words upon us. I hated that man, those men, but those words still bring me comfort.
mm-hmm,
Those men lied to themselves and they lied to us. They told stories of a God above and a devil below. So this is Remick speaking, but Ryan Coogler put these words in his mouth, right? He said, in lies of dominion of man over beast and earth.
yep,
We are earth and beast and God. We are
yep,
man, we are woman, we are connected, you and I, to everything.
yep,
So he
yep,
just brought it all home, man.
yep,
He just
yep,
brought it all. We are it,
yep.
right? We we
And it's
we are.
really interesting that Coogler would put that into that particular character's mouth because as a vampire, he had evolved consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
He had an evolved experience of nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yes.
and that's so, that's so, in one perspective, absolutely wicked, evil creature. But another perspective, he was evolved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those words were meant for him and how his ancestors were lied to as well as a white guy,
Mm-hmm.
or as humanity as a whole. Because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that his message of we are all one was total just deception. And I mean, it was game to get what he wanted because he wanted to convert everybody to be like him. Misery loves company, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what I was seeing in that, and even that part that you just quoted, was just that, that is true humanity. That is what this is. It is one. We know that from the African worldview and perspective. Even Urugu, was on his way, but was prematurely, you know, born or miscarried, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was on its way, but the part in its development, which its developmental growth was stunted, created the product that we have as Urugu right now. But yeah, so that juju piece though, man. She was just, she said how much I was praying and all the roots I was using to keep you and that old knucklehead brother of yours alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
He unbuttoned the shirt, he had it on. She was like, and she just looked at it. He's like, I do believe, sis, and thank you.
So dig this, man. I was looking as I was looking at that particular scene, um, as Remick and Sammy are fighting.
Yeah.
You also see in that scene Smoke and Stack fighting.
Yes.
And there's a scene, it's very brief, and I had to watch it a couple of times to see how intentional Coogler was in editing this in. There's a scene where when Stack the vampire is on top of his brother and he gets closer to bite him, you hear this strange sound and you see the camera shake and he flies off. That's the
Mm,
juju bag that protected. It happened
protect,
twice.
it protected him.
It happened twice.
Yep. It
Um,
protected him.
and when Stack got to the point where he was ready to join his wife and his child, he took it off
Yep.
because
Yeah,
he's ready
smoke.
to go.
Yep. Yep.
Smoke, yes,
Yep.
and
That's when he took it off and he looked at it.
hmm
And it
hmm
was kind of like honoring it. Like,
Absolutely. You
Give me
did your
thanks.
job. You
Yeah.
got me this far. I'm ready to join you and my child.
I took these Klansmen out, you know what I mean? Let me come home to my babies and
Yeah.
let me take this next step. And then, with Sammy with that guitar, when he cracked him in the head, it had that silver disc on it. And that goes back to the top of our conversation. The very first scene in the movie, he was clutching it.
Mm-hmm.
It's what saved his life. And if you remember, in the opening scene, he went to church, and in the very next scene, they cut, and he's in a cotton field picking
Mm-hmm.
cotton. So it's like he wanted to get off the plantation. He was trying to break the chains of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And this was
Exactly.
the way for him to do it. And him wrestling with Remick was him wrestling with the devil because
Well,
Mhm.
look, dig this. He was wrestling with the devil, but he was also wrestling with his father. Unpack this for me, Jeff, because in the very beginning of the film, is Sammy clutching the neck of the guitar in his right hand, stumbles into the church. His father walks to him, says, Sammy, drop the guitar, drop the guitar. And as Sammy, who's in a state of shock, is looking at his father, you see Remick appears inside of his father. So Remick
Yeah,
and his father were one. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
that energy was the same. And that's what Sammy saw. That's why Sammy couldn't listen to his father and drop the guitar, because he knew the guitar was his salvation. Now here's the kicker. Here's the kicker, and I would love to have an opportunity to have a conversation with Ryan so I could ask him this.
yeah,
Um, Sammy finds out from Smoke that the guitar that he thought belonged to the famous blues guitarist Charlie Patton was really Smoke and Stack's father's guitar. And Smoke and Stack's father was the brother of Sammy's father, the younger
yeah,
brother. So
yeah,
there's a whole story that could be unpacked there about what the relationship was like between these two brothers and whose guitar was it really? You know, I got this
right.
idea. It may have been Jedediah's guitar,
Mhm.
you know?
Wow.
And,
Yeah,
and so he knew the evil that was in that guitar, or the power that was in that guitar.
power. Yeah,
And that's what prompted him to cast the guitar aside to keep his son from picking up the guitar. But the son knew the power and how to use the power for good, right?
yeah,
And as I heard, it was either Ryan or someone discussing that juke joint scene, that Sammy was a descendant of a jelly. So the first ancestor you saw playing that string instrument was Sammy's ancestor,
yeah. Playing the Cora.
playing the kora. Yeah,
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
the
And so,
kora.
so watch this. And so that whole piece about the devil wanted to claim, Remick wanted to claim Sammy specifically
Mm-hmm.
because he had that power of the voice. He
Right.
had that power and command of music. He
Mm-hmm.
took over that entire room with his song. The
Mm-hmm.
devil needed that to possess that power and that ability. The
Yes.
vampire devil needed that. And so that was them wrestling again. And so that whole speech that he was giving was also to manipulate Sammy's mind and to think like, wait a minute, this guy is not bad. We're saying the same thing. They did
Mm.
impose that upon me and my people. So he's not steering me wrong. And it was an attempt, just like his father, like you said, an
Sure.
attempt to steer him into a certain lane, a certain path. When the father was trying to do it, Sammy showed him like, I don't have to read this book. I don't have to read Corinthians 10, 15, 2 Corinthians, I think 10,
10,
15,
10 through 13. First
10, 13.
Corinthians 10 through 13. Yep.
Okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Second Corinthians. Yeah, first, I'm
No,
sorry.
First
10,
Corinthians.
17.
First, no,
Right there.
I made it. I got it in my notes, brother.
I just looked at mine too, my bad. But the whole thing about that was temptation.
Yes,
That whole
exactly.
those lines are about temptation. And so being tempted on both ends. And he
Mm-hmm.
showed his pops like, I ain't got to read it. I know it by heart.
Yes.
I'm beyond you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
beyond this. My
Mm-hmm.
purpose goes beyond this space that you have people trapped in. Because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time too on those ritual floors, the people leading the ritual and benignly or maliciously are tapping into the energy of the people
Abs-
ritualizing on the floor. And
absolutely.
so the preacher in front of the congregation gets them riled up. He's being fed.
Absolutely.
The kids nowadays they call it aura farming. And it's a very interesting, and I think that might, yeah, I
Ooh,
think
I
it
like
comes
that
from like
concept.
from some type of animation. I think it comes
Mm-hmm.
from one of those like Japanimation or Yu-Gi-Oh type things, but they say it's
Okay.
aura farming. So it's like they're like
Mm.
when you like taking energy from somebody. Like you try to like, but they say it in a way like you're just copying somebody's swag, or you getting close to somebody else's swag so you can get some of it. But it's still vampiric. Right? And so they
Sure.
were their aura of farming. And so Remick was trying to take possession of the power of that vocalist, the
Absolutely.
power of Sammy. Because then you know that story about the man who supposedly sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads.
Robert Johnson.
Yes, and became the guitarist. So it was all intertwined with that same story and that same message. But that temptation piece, along with dichotomy, was an everlasting theme. And matter of fact, Stack used temptation. His hustle was temptation. Remember when he was trying to get what's the elder's name? He was playing the harmonica.
Oh, Delroy Lindo.
Delroy Lindo. Yeah, we was trying to
Delta
get
Slim.
Slim.
Delta Slim.
Delta
It
Slim.
brought out the beer.
He brought the beer. He cracked it first, like dude was like, wait a minute. He was about acting, he's about to drink it. Hold on now. Right? I might even let you finish that bottle. So
Yes.
he was a con man, and that way he would tempt you on your own vice to get you to go along with the program. Even though he was going to treat you right and fairly, but he needed to entice you the same way the devil would to get you to
So
go along.
listen, man. Another aspect I picked up from watching the film a couple of times was Stack was a pimp in Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas. There's a scene when they're talking about the money.
Yeah,
Smoke
he said he
says
wasn't
to him,
selling.
you wouldn't take wooden nickels when you were selling ass. Right?
Yeah,
You were selling ass in in Arkansas, right?
Yep.
And then when Stack is with Mary, he talked about, I told you to leave. I taught you how to leave when the money ran out.
That's right.
Right. So
right.
Mary was his main hoe. And,
Yes.
and there's a line when he was first turned and was locked behind the door. He said, y'all let this pimp out of here. Right.
And remember what Mary said? She said, when she was talking about fighting, she's like, you taught me how to fight.
That's right. I beat all these bitches' ass because you taught me how to fight.
You taught me how to fight. Yep.
Exactly.
So that was what that dynamic was. And he said, I told you, leave me alone. But she said, yeah, but then you put your tongue in the cooter, and she did all that. And so that's what I also want to talk about. Because so they both had women of their own kind.
Exactly.
Smoke's woman was of his nature. Stacks was of his nature. They fit perfectly together. They were the yang and yang and the yin and yin together. So again, they carried on in it was very consistent, man. Very consistent movie. And there's so many layers to it. One thing I really wish would have happened, I wish the Choctaw would have rolled up again.
Well, yeah. Now, as I was, researching that history, I had asked myself, why the Choctaw? Well, during the Trail of Tears happened during the time of the Great Potato Famine in Ireland.
Yes.
And there's a story of the Choctaw collecting $500-something and taking that money to Ireland. A delegation of Choctaw went to Ireland with that money to give it to them to help them out because they all were being oppressed by the same Anglo-Saxon. So, I appreciate the research that Ryan Coogler puts into his films, and then the subtle touches. And, there was talk at one time, or at least an expression of hope, that he would do a part 2 of Sinners, either a backstory or expand on the characters. But Ryan said, no, I'm done.
This
I
was
did
where it's
what I
at.
wanted to do. And I'm grateful, man. I'm grateful for this
The
talent.
Choctaw, I wanted to see their juju, man. I wanted to see them come back with they fight, what they would use, because they were tracking that guy.
Absolutely.
And even said a prayer when they didn't want to listen, said, God bless you, take care. They rolled out, before that sun dropped all the way. But I would have loved to have seen their expression of magic and what they used to fight the vampires, because there's a story there. There's a story within the story that, like you said, Coogler, he gave us a glimpse at it. He said, you can go look further into it if you want to, but that's there. And he also remember when I think it was the guy that sold them the juke joint. He said, you sure it was the Indian, or was it some light-skinned niggers?
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
showing
It was Jed in the house where we first see Remick.
Yep, that's right. When he's at the
Sure
door.
wasn't some light-skinned nigga. I'm like, where is that coming from?
Because of that close relationship between the two, and how we did coexist with each other on certain levels.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. But it was a brilliant movie, man. I mean, I bought it too, the streaming too. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go and get it too, so I can just keep watching it.
Now, I had heard that in the DVD and the Blu-ray, which are supposed to drop next month, that those are supposed to have deleted scenes
Hmm.
and bonuses. I was hoping that that would be in the streaming, but I
Right.
haven't seen any indication of that. But
No,
I may
they want
just
all the money.
I'd be willing to contribute another, $20 or so just to
Yeah.
see the elements that didn't make it in the film,
Yeah.
because I know there was a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it had to be. I mean, that's got to be a difficult job, man, to edit a movie like that, and leave
Mhm.
this stuff, certain things. Matter of fact, I didn't watch a lot of interview. I don't watch any interviews about it. I like to
Okay.
just, especially if I'm going to talk about it, I want to just look at it and just bring me to the conversation. But I did see a glimpse with Mr. Delroy. They're talking about that scene in the car and how they
Yes.
started singing,
Mm-hmm.
and Coogler edited it out. And Mr. Delroy said, "No, man, please, we got to keep that in there."
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was
Mm-hmm.
so authentic. He said it
Mm-hmm.
was unscripted, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He just
It's
started,
all improvised.
and then Stack was like, "Boy, you got that guitar," and they just set in the song. And he
Mm-hmm.
said all of that was just authentic and genuine expression, and it
Yeah.
got cut. But he said it to Cooler, put it back in there,
Mm-hmm.
put it back
Absolutely.
in there. Yeah,
And that speaks to Kugler's respect for his elders.
that's right. That's
The brother is grounded in that he knows his business, but he also knows to respect those elders that know a little bit more than him.
That's right, and to also listen to your people.
Yeah.
It's just like I watched this interview with Jermaine Dupri, and so he was talking about producing a song, and he talked about how it was Mariah Carey, matter of fact, and
Okay.
she was saying that she wanted to do a song with Old Dirty Bastard, from the Wu-Tang Clan. It ended up being Fantasy remix. He's like, man, no, I ain't gonna do that, that. She just kind of pushed and pushed and pushed, and so he said, okay, and it turned out to be a classic hit. And so it's like a creative, a producer, a leader in their field also knows to listen to the people that they're working with,
Sure.
because they are also in a place of receptivity, not only to his direction, but to the craft itself. And so something might come through them that
Mm-hmm.
he misses. And if he shuts it down, then he's going to miss it too. And it's going to blow a great opportunity.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, look, man, I thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you as always.
Yeah. It's my
And
honor, man.
you have an open door to come on the show if you've got something you want to talk about, an event that's coming up, and you want to promote it here on the program. You got a free opportunity to do that whenever you want, brother.
I
Appreciate you.
appreciate you, brother. Anytime you need me, man, I'm there. You know that.
Okay.
Uh,
And
I'll
I'll connect you
be
with
talking.
Dr. Mays too.
Yeah, please do, man. I ain't seen Eric in a long time, man. Since our Howard days.
Hmm.
But I'm going to be reaching out as well to see if you could, if you want to do a guest lecture in the concepts of psychology in ancient Egypt class.